New black transfer mocked by bully. Seconds later, he's begging for mercy. Let me go. Aaliyah gasped, voice cracking like glass under the weight of Connor Mitchell's fist against her locker. The corridor's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting her shadow against those cold metal panels, while her wooden bead bracelet, a gift from her mother, tapped softly against her wrist, a heartbeat reminder of home. No one moved. Phones hovered, cameras poised. She realized in that moment just how alone she was. 3 days ago, Aaliyah Thompson had stepped off the bus in suburban Elmwood, her heart pounding louder than the late summer cicadas. Her family's move from Boston had promised a fresh start, a chance to bury old scars to escape whispers of the fighter girl who once dominated local taekwondo tournaments. But whispers spread in their own way here too. By second period, she was already the newcomer. By third, she was the perfect target for Connor Mitchell Sr. royalty, whose father's real estate empire financed half the school's renovations. He'd cornered her behind the gym, sneering that he could buy and break anyone, but Aaliyah's eyes flickered with something fierce. Every fiber of her being screamed to strike back, to unleash the discipline she'd honed since age 6, low stances, precise blocks, those fluid strikes that once drew cheers in smoky gymnasiums. But an old promise lingered. "Stay invisible," her mother's voice had murmured. "We can't afford trouble." The bracelet's smooth wooden beads whispered memories of late-night forms, practice of ribbons and trophies, reminders that strength came from patience, from choosing when to unleash power. Connor's friends laughed, a chorus of entitlement that rattled her resolve. One shoved her harder. Metal lockers rattled like distant thunder. Aaliyah's breath hitched. Every instinct told her to fight, yet every worry about her mother's sacrifices held her back. The world here already saw her as an outsider, black and proud in the hallways, where privilege wore a Nike swoosh and designer backpacks gleamed under the lights. What would they think if she fought back? Would she become the villain they expected, that angry girl who just couldn't stay in her lane? She closed her eyes, bracing against the wall. The bracelet. A spark of something new ignited in her chest. Not fear, but resolve. If the system wouldn't protect her, if the school turned a blind eye to Connor's smirks and insider status, then she'd protect herself. Just then, a voice cracked through the laughter. "Aaliyah, you okay?" She blinked. Javier Martinez, the junior volleyball captain, with a quiet way of observing everything. He lingered by the end of the hall, hesitant but present. Her heart hammered, ally or bystander. Before she could answer, Connor leaned in, lips curling. "You think that bead bracelet's enough to save you?" His mocking tone cut deep. Aaliyah's fingers tightened around the beads. Somewhere between hiding her past and owning her power lay a choice. As Connor slammed her back once more, the wooden beads whispered a question. "Will you let this moment define you?" And in that heartbeat, something irreversible stirred beneath her timid surface, a promise to stand tall no matter the cost. She drew in a steady breath, ready to reply. But before her voice could find its strength, the locker doors behind them creaked ominously. "Your phone just went viral," Javier hissed, voice low enough that only Aaliyah could hear it over the rattling lockers. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she stared down at the screen. Hundreds of views in under 60 seconds, the video of her pinned against the cold metal now spreading through every social feed at Elmwood High. The wooden beads of her bracelet, smooth and reassuring under her fingers, might as well have been the only solid thing in that chaotic moment. She forced herself to breathe deeply, recalling her mother's words. "Strength is your choice, not your reaction." In the half-empty hallway, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the stale scent of old textbooks lingered in the air. Javier glanced over his shoulder. The jocks who swarmed the corridor had their phones raised, faces illuminated by screens instead of empathy. Aaliyah remembered the piercing arrogance in Connor Mitchell's sneer, felt the sting of his careless punch that left a bruise blooming on her jaw. And yet as the video unfurled online, something unexpected flickered through her, an ember of power that had nothing to do with physical strikes. "Why would he do this?" she murmured, eyes fixed on the bracelet. Each bead marked a tournament win a lesson in patience, discipline, and the quiet confidence she'd vowed never to reveal again. The twist she couldn't shake was this: the school's newly launched Equity and Inclusion Initiative meant that the administration was forced to investigate any sign of racial harassment or bullying. Connor's father, a major donor, had leveraged influence for years, and now the very policy he'd quietly supported as a PR move could become his undoing. Javier slid closer, voice earnest. "We can turn this around. Mia's streaming a live Q&A in the library after school. If we frame your story right, show them how you fought back only to defend yourself, you'll become more than a viral victim. You'll be a symbol." Aaliyah's mind spun. The risk was monumental. If she misstepped, she'd be branded the violent transfer student suspended, or worse. But if she succeeded, she could expose the hypocrisy of a system that pretended to celebrate diversity while protecting its golden boy. The tape in her pocket, a hastily recorded clip of Connor bragging about breaking bones and reputations, might serve as the twist no one expected. Yet deep down, she worried about Javier's safety too. His own family had business dealings intertwined with the Mitchells. Could he really back her, or would he vanish at the first whisper of backlash? She clicked her jaw, thrusting her chin forward. "All right," she breathed, sliding the phone back into her pocket. "Let's do this." As they slipped through the throngs of students toward the library, Aaliyah's fingers brushed the beads of her bracelet once more. Each bead tapped out a rhythm, courage, resilience, purpose. The weight of the coming confrontation settled behind her eyes as she peered down the corridor where the doors to the old gym loomed like a challenge. In that moment, she understood that real strength wasn't about hiding her past. It was about choosing how to wield it and to whom she would be accountable. When the final bell rang, Aaliyah's pulse thundered as she stepped into the cool shadow of the abandoned gym, its cracked windows casting ghostly beams across the dusty floor. Tonight the fight would begin, and there was no turning back. "Think you're tough now?" Connor's voice echoed through the abandoned gym as Aaliyah stepped into the cold, musty air, the overhead lights flickering like a failing heartbeat. The two boys from the wrestling team flanked him, arms folded, their breath visible in the dust-laden air. Aaliyah's wooden bead bracelet felt heavier than ever against her wrist, each bead a silent vow to herself, strength tempered with purpose. She inhaled the scent of old gym mats and mildew filling her lungs. This was it, the moment she either reclaimed her dignity or became the cautionary tale everyone feared. Connor laughed, a dark, dismissive sound. "You really brought that bead nonsense. Let's see if it holds up." He took a step forward, shoving a loose bleacher plank into her path. The plank clattered, jolting her heartbeat into overdrive. Logic urged her to retreat. Fight here would mean no witnesses, no guarantee of safety. Yet the social stakes loomed larger if she backed down. Now the viral video would cement her image as prey, and Connor's reputation as untouchable royalty would only grow. She closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, recalling her coach's words. True power is knowing when to fight and why. Her eyes snapped open. "I'm here because I refuse to be invisible," she said, voice steady, despite her racing pulse. The words surprised even her. Connor's sneer faltered for an instant. "Bold for a girl who can't even get an apology," he spat. He charged. Aaliyah braced herself, feet shoulder-width apart, in the stance she'd perfected for years. His fist rocked toward her jaw, but she pivoted low and precise, blocking with the side of her forearm. The movement carried surprising force. Her opponent staggered back. The first twist, her defense wasn't raw aggression, but disciplined technique, something no one had seen coming. She could almost hear her mother's quiet reminder. "You are defined by your choices, not by what happens to you." Those wooden beads pressed into her skin, a tactile anchor, as she whispered under her breath. "This is my choice." Connor lunged again. Aaliyah sidestepped and landed a controlled strike to his shoulder. He grunted more in shock than pain. 2 more times he struck, and 2 more times she redirected his energy, sending him stumbling into a stack of dusty mats. Her heart pounded. The risk was tangible. If she went too far, she'd be branded a bully. If she held back, she'd be crushed physically and symbolically. As she readied for the next exchange, a distant siren wailed an unexpected twist. Security. The Equity and Inclusion Initiative required transparency now. Any sign of disproportionate force would trigger an immediate intervention. Connor spat out a curse and squared his shoulders, fury igniting in his eyes. He charged headlong, fists flying in a flurry. Aaliyah's breath caught as she blocked, evaded, and countered with a palm strike to his chest. He gasped, winded for the first time. The bench seats rattled behind them as Mia's live stream notification pings echoed in her mind, a reminder that half the school was watching online. Connor paused, chest-heaving realization dawning. The quiet transfer was no timid mouse. She was a disciplined fighter who had chosen this moment to stand. Aaliyah felt a rush of clarity. This fight was no longer just about self-defense. It was a statement against a system that protected entitlement over justice. She lifted her chin, ready for the climax, and then footsteps thundered outside the gym doors, followed by a low, authoritative voice. Freeze! Principal Clarkson's voice boomed as the gym doors swung open, flooding the dusty floor with harsh, fluorescent glare. Aaliyah's heart stuttered mid-strike. Connor skidded to a halt, chest heaving like he'd just run a marathon. 2 campus officers filed in beside Clarkson and Miss Sanders, their radios crackling with commands to secure the scene. For a moment, everything froze, the echo of Connor's final lunging blow, the soft tap-tap of Aaliyah's wooden bead bracelet, and the whir of Mia's live stream feeding into hundreds of phones. Reality slammed into her. This wasn't a private showdown anymore. It was a full-on spectacle with her future hanging in the balance. Connor straightened his bloodied jacket, smearing dust and sweat across its pristine fabric. "She attacked me first," he spat, voice trembling with a blend of rage and fear. Miss Sanders raised a hand, silencing him. "That's enough," she said quietly to the officers. Her gaze locked on Aaliyah, searching her face for lies. The wooden beads glowed under the flickering lights, each one a silent testament to discipline and restraint. Aaliyah lifted her chin, braces on her teeth, glittering. She felt every pair of eyes waiting for truth, for drama, for a verdict. The Equity and Inclusion Initiative banner in the corner of the gym seemed to mock the hypocrisy diversity plus justice for all it proclaimed in cheerful block letters. Justice hung by a thread now. Clarkson surveyed the scene like a judge on a throne. "Explain," he commanded, voice cold but curious. Aaliyah remembered Javier's advice, speak calmly, acknowledge the risk, own your power. She inhaled, pushing back fear and adrenaline. "I was cornered," she began, voice steady. "He threatened me and shoved me twice. I defended myself, nothing more." She reached up, touching her jaw where a bruise was blooming purple. Every bead on her bracelet pressed into her skin, each a heartbeat, courage, resilience, integrity. The officers exchanged glances. One tapped a note into his tablet. Mia's live stream comments exploded on every screen. She stood up for herself. "That's so empowering. Connor got what he deserved." The digital audience was already casting judgment. Connor's sidekick, a tall boy with a wrestling jacket, stepped forward, face pale. It wasn't her fault, he admitted, voice shaking. She only fought back when he wouldn't stop. Clarkson's stern jaw softened fractionally. Miss Sanders nodded, relief flickering in her eyes. "Write that down," Clarkson ordered the officer. "And both of you, Aaliyah Thompson and Connor Mitchell, come to my office in 30 minutes. The officers buzzed their radios. Clarkson turned on his heel, muttering to Sanders about a written statement and parental notifications. As the group dispersed, Aaliyah lingered, brushing her fingers over the beads. The gym felt emptier, now shadows stretching like silent witnesses to her choice to fight back, to risk everything for justice. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, a text from Mia. "They're talking. You okay?" Aaliyah exhaled, storms of relief and dread swirling. She replied simply, "I'm here." As she stepped out into the corridor, flanked by the echo of Clarkson's office door closing, She realized the real test was just beginning. Would the system she'd challenged uphold its own promise, or funnel her struggle into another form of silence? You're suspended pending further review, Aaliyah. Those words hit me harder than any punch Connor ever threw. I slid down onto the vinyl bench in the empty hallway outside Principal Clarkson's office, my wooden bead bracelet rattling against my wrist like nervous fingertips. The corridor lights hummed overhead, and I could swear the equity and inclusion banner in the office window was mocking me, justice for all. Justice had just sidelined me. I pressed my palms to my temples, tasting the metallic tang of adrenaline and dread. Every bead on that bracelet represented years of disciplined training, and now it felt like a gag on my potential. Walking home that afternoon, I passed clusters of students, whispering heads swiveling as if I were some exotic exhibit. The social hierarchy at Elmwood High was a living thing, and right now it licked its lips at my vulnerability, a suspended troublemaker who'd dared challenge the golden boy. My dad's old camo duffel bag felt heavier than usual as I slung it across my shoulder, the chain-link fence beside me, casting warped shadows on the concrete. I remembered Mom's voice. Strength is choosing the right battle, and I wondered if I'd chosen poorly. That night, I lay awake under the single lamp in my cramped room, the quiet broken only by my phone's buzzing. Mia's texts lit up the screen. They've launched an investigation into Connor's father's donations. The initiative board can't ignore it now. My heart skipped. The twist nobody saw coming, the school's own diversity campaign, was finally being used to hold privileged families accountable. If I played my cards right, I could turn my suspension into leverage for everyone who'd ever been silenced. The next morning I woke before my alarm hands tingling with nervous energy. I slipped on my favorite hoodie and tucked the bracelet under the cuff, a secret talisman. At breakfast, Mom caught my eye-worried lines creasing her forehead. "How are you?" she asked softly. I forced a smile, remembering the night she packed us up and moved us from Boston seeking safety and stability. "I'm okay," I lied, swallowing the lump in my throat. I couldn't tell her that I felt more exposed than ever. In the cafeteria, I found Javier and Mia huddled in our corner booth, conspiracy maps drawn on napkins, screenshots of emails linking Connor's donations to hush money clauses, quotes from policy documents, hashtags drafted for the upcoming Fwanner Stand Strong campaign. They looked up, eyes bright. "We need you," Mia said. "Your story anchors this. Without your voice, it's just another internet rumor." Javier slid his phone across the table, live stats of the campaign's early traction, hundreds of shares, local news outlets sniffing around. My throat tightened. The risk was colossal, push too hard, and I'd be labeled a manipulator. Stay silent, and the system would reset to favor the powerful. I touched the beads under my sleeve. Each flick of my thumb summoned a memory, the roar of the crowd at a taekwondo tournament, the proud smile on my coach's face. I realized the fight wasn't over. This was just a new front. The beads whispered, "Purpose, not fear." I squared my shoulders. "Let's do it," I whispered. And as we sketched out the first flyer for an all-school assembly, I felt the first real surge of hope in days. But outside the window I saw a flock of students drifting past the library doors, some curious, some hostile, and I knew the next move would demand everything I had. "Are you really ready to speak in front of the whole school?" Mia's whisper hit me like a thunderclap as I stared down at the flyers we'd taped across the library entrance. "Stand Strong Assembly, Friday 2 p.m. main auditorium." My heartbeat thundered, matching the rhythm of the wooden beads hidden under my cuff, each one a hushed promise, courage, resilience, purpose. Just days ago, I was the silent transfer student. Now I was about to step onto the stage and risk everything. The library was buzzing with nervous energy as about 20 students filtered in timid faces, eager smiles, skeptical glances. Javier stood off to the side, arms crossed, eyes fierce with protective determination. He'd convinced the Equity and Inclusion Board to let us use their counselor's office to rehearse our lines. But the real risk lay ahead. The auditorium would be packed with students hungry for drama, parents on edge, and teachers torn between supporting policy and appeasing powerful donors. My suspension hung over me like storm clouds, ready to unleash lightning if I flinched. I inhaled, summoning that internal well I'd tapped in the gym, the discipline of my Taekwondo heritage, the whispered memory of my mother's voice. Strength is built in moments you feel weakest. I stepped forward, clutching a bead from my bracelet. The room fell silent. "I never imagined I'd see you up here," a freshman murmured, eyes wide. I nodded, letting a small, genuine smile break through. "Neither did I admitted, voice steady. But I realized something crucial: silence only empowers bullies. Our stories, no matter how small, are weapons against invisibility. I moved to the whiteboard and scrawled a single word: solidarity. Underneath, I listed our goals: share personal experiences, create peer support groups, partner with counselors, and hold bullies accountable. Each bullet point triggered murmurs of agreement. But tension crackled when I added the last one: require transparency in disciplinary decisions, even for donor families. A hush descended. This was the twist logic no one expected, demanding policy change, not just personal catharsis. A hand shot up, one of Connor's former friends, her tone wary. "You really think the administration will do that? What about donations?" I met her gaze, recalling how her father had bragged about Connor's sponsorship at the Booster Club. The stain of entitlement still smelled like cheap cologne in the hallways. "They'll try to silence us," I said softly. "But when enough voices stand together, their influence can't drown us out." The wooden bead in my palm warmed with conviction, symbolic of every disciplined choice I'd made, every risk I'd taken. Behind me, Javier and Mia exchanged a glance. Mia tapped her phone. Live practice. 1K watching. We were already on camera. My pulse leapt. "We're live," I whispered, then turned back to the group. That's the power of solidarity. Our voice becomes unstoppable. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, picturing the auditorium doors swinging open, the equity and inclusion banner looming overhead, and hundreds of faces waiting. The bracelet's beads pressed into my skin, as if to remind me, once you choose to stand, you can never go back. I opened my eyes, cleared my throat, and stepped away from the whiteboard. "Let's run the speech," I said. As Mia hit record, my voice echoed through the library, steadier than I expected. But just as I found my rhythm, the library doors clacked open, and a group of furious parents, their whispers seething about defaming good families, spilled inside. My stomach dropped. The real test wasn't the stage, but facing the backlash head-on. "Get your hands off my counselor." Aaliyah's voice cut through the chaos like a knife as two furious parents lunged toward Javier and me in the crowded library. Their faces were red with indignation, voices spilling accusations about smearing good families and defaming our children. My bracelet's wooden beads felt like anchors against my skin, each one a heartbeat, reminding me of every disciplined choice that led me here. I squared my shoulders, wiped a bead between my thumb and forefinger, and breathed in a quiet vow this moment would define us, not them. Just minutes earlier, the library had been a haven of tentative hope. Now it was a battleground of entitlement versus equity. Parents clustered at the entrance, murmuring about pulling donations if the initiative went too far. The news crew's cameras hovered in the corner, red lights flickering. The equity and inclusion banner on the wall trembled, as if mocking us, justice for all. But justice felt like a fragile snow globe, beautiful until shaken, threatening to shatter at the slightest tremor. I took a step forward. "You say you support this school?" I said, voice low but steady, "yet you threaten to bankroll silence rather than listen." The library fell into stunned quiet. I remembered the twist Javier uncovered last night: emails proving that Connor's father had secretly bundled donations contingent on hush agreements. If we exposed that clause at the assembly today, it would force full transparency, or watch the program crumble under its own hypocrisy. A father snarled, "How dare you expose private agreements?" I met his glare without blinking. "Because privacy shouldn't be a weapon against accountability. You sent your children here to learn responsibility, not entitlement." One by one, the parents murmured among themselves. Javier slipped me a phone, showing the campaign's live view count, tens of thousands already watching our rehearsal. The stakes were higher than ever, one wrong line, one moment of doubt, and we'd become the villains in our own story. I glanced at Mia, who gave me a firm nod. Then I turned back to the crowd. Our goal isn't to punish a single family, I continued, each word crystallizing like snowflakes in winter, but to create a community where every student, regardless of race, wealth, or last name, can feel safe to stand up, be heard, and belong. My finale hung in the air, powerful but untested. The parents' faces shifted, some with grudging respect, others with fury still smoldering. Just then, Principal Clarkson burst in, cheeks flushed, clutching a sheaf of emails. "That's enough," he barked, voice echoing off the shelves. The library doors slammed behind him, snapping, the tension taut as a wire. He turned to the parents, holding up the documents. Their hush-money clause lay bare for all to see. A hushed gasp rippled through the room. I felt my pulse race victory and peril, waltzing on the edge of a blade. Clarkson's next words would determine whether we'd shattered the illusion of justice for all or been crushed by the very system we sought to change. And in that pregnant pause, I realized the real battle was just beginning. Today, we rewrite the rules, I whispered to myself, as Principal Clarkson cleared his throat and stepped forward, the hush in the auditorium thick enough to taste. Rows of students, parents, and faculty sat riveted. The anti-bullying banners swayed behind me like silent witnesses. My wooden bead bracelet pulsed against my skin, each bead a memory of every choice I'd made, each one whispering, "This is your moment." Mia's camera light blinked in the corner, and Javier stood just offstage, eyes burning with solidarity. I inhaled, letting the weight of every risk settle into purpose. Connor Mitchell's father, seated in the front row, glanced sideways at the trustee board members behind him. Their expressions were unreadable beneath the glare of stage lights. I could almost see the tangled lines of power donations, hush money clauses, the old guard, afraid of losing control. And here I was, a suspended transfer student, calibrating my next words to strike precisely at that imbalance. I stepped to the microphone and summoned the calm I'd cultivated over years of taekwondo training, disciplined breathing, focused eyes, centered stance. "Good afternoon," I began, voice steady, but carrying in the hushed hall. "My name is Aaliyah Thompson, and I stand here not just for myself, but for every student who has ever felt invisible." I paused, scanning the faces, some skeptical, others nodding. "Today, we demand transparency and accountability. We ask that every disciplinary decision, regardless of donor status, be made public within 72 hours. We ask for a peer support council where survivors of bullying can lead solutions. We ask the district to protect students, not reputations." A ripple of applause rose, then stilled, as I reached the climax. But most of all, I continued, voice rising, "We ask you to believe in our voices." I lifted my wrist, letting the wooden beads catch the light. This bracelet is more than a keepsake from my mother. It's a symbol of purpose, discipline, and unbreakable resolve. If you break us once, we will rebuild. If you silence one, we will amplify 1,000 voices. The beads shimmered like talismans at the microphone's base. A hush fell again, heavy with possibility. At that moment, Clarkson's phone buzzed. He glanced down, then up at the trustees, and their solemn nod gave me the opening. "Your proposal is accepted," he announced, voice resonant. Murmurs erupted, relief, disbelief, hope. Connor's father sat stiffly, color draining from his face, as the board formally pledged to adopt our demands. Students leapt to their feet. Even some of Connor's friends clapped, their expressions shifting from fear to awe. Afterward, I stepped off stage into a whirlwind, congratulatory embraces, tearful parents, buzzing phones capturing every reaction. Mia streamed live as I hugged Javier, and Mom, who'd slipped in quietly, tears glimmering in her eyes. The auditorium lights dimmed, but the fire ignited that afternoon would never fade. Our Sutter Stand Strong movement trended nationwide. Local news ran segments, and soon other schools reached out, inspired to hold their own assemblies. Yet even in triumph, I knew this was just the beginning. Power never relinquishes willingly, and for every policy change, someone will seek to bend the rules. As I walked through the now changed hallways of Elmwood High, the echo of my footsteps blended with countless whispers, some of admiration, some of doubt. And I realized that true justice is a journey, not a destination. My wooden beads tapped softly, reminding me that vigilance, courage, and solidarity must remain our guiding stars. So here's where we stand. We've shattered one illusion, but how many more lie hidden beneath the surface? If you've ever felt powerless, ask yourself, what would you stand up for?